The rain had stopped, but the streets of downtown were still slick, glowing under the soft amber of streetlights. Inside a sleek black car with tinted windows, Jackson Reed, CEO of a billion-dollar tech firm, leaned back in his seat, rubbing his temples. It had been a long day filled with board meetings, investor calls, and the constant weight of decision-making. The silence of the city at night was a rare comfort, something he rarely got to enjoy. "Take the long way home," he told his driver, needing a moment away from the sterile luxury of his high-rise penthouse. As they turned down a quieter street near the city hospital, Jackson's eyes caught a figure at a nearby bus stop. He sat forward, squinting through the drizzle-specked glass. There, huddled beneath a flickering street lamp, was a young woman in light blue scrubs, curled up on the bench. Her long dark hair was tied back loosely. A hospital ID badge dangled from her neck, and her thin jacket was wrapped tightly around her shoulders like a shield from the night chill. A small duffel bag rested at her feet. "She sleeping there?" Jackson asked aloud, more to himself than to his driver. "Looks like it, sir," the driver replied quietly. Jackson stared. There was something hauntingly peaceful, and heartbreaking, about the scene. Why would a nurse be sleeping at a bus stop at midnight? She looked exhausted, not just physically, but soul-deep. He could see it even through the fogged glass. He thought about rolling down the window, about asking her if she needed help, but something stopped him. Maybe pride. Maybe her safety. Maybe his own unresolved guilt about how far he'd come and how many people he'd stepped past on the way up. But he couldn't forget her face. As the car pulled away, Jackson glanced back one last time. "She shouldn't be out there," he murmured. And for the first time in years, something stirred in his heart that no deal or dollar ever had. He didn't know it yet, but that brief glimpse would change both of their lives forever. The next morning, Jackson sat at the corner table of a small cafe across the street from St. Grace General Hospital, the same hospital near where he'd seen the nurse. He wore a plain jacket and baseball cap, an effort to remain unnoticed. His phone buzzed with notifications from executives and board members, but he ignored them all. His mind was elsewhere. He watched the revolving doors of the hospital as workers poured in and out, doctors, janitors, paramedics. Then, just before 7 a.m., he saw her. The same woman from the night before, wearing the same scrubs, now clutching a takeaway coffee. Her face was drawn, her steps heavy. She smiled politely at the security guard as she entered, but the weariness in her eyes was unmistakable. Jackson got up, paid for his untouched coffee, and made his way across the street. Inside the hospital, he asked to speak with a volunteer coordinator, pretending to be a donor interested in supporting frontline staff. After a few introductions and a brief wait, he was escorted to a small office where a kind older woman greeted him. "I'm looking to quietly support a few staff members who've gone above and beyond," Jackson explained. "There's one nurse I saw last night. She was wearing blue scrubs, dark hair, looked young. I think her badge said Nina." The coordinator smiled softly. "That would be Nina Lopez. One of our best night shift nurses. Always picking up extra hours. Never complains. Does she live far from here?" Jackson asked carefully. The woman's expression turned sad. "She used to rent nearby, but her lease ended last month. I heard she hasn't found another place yet. Someone said she's been sleeping on buses or at the stop between shifts." Jackson's chest tightened. "Why hasn't the hospital helped?" "We try," the woman said, her voice low. "But there are so many like her. Budget cuts, red tape. It's heartbreaking." Jackson stood there, silent. He had walked through gilded boardrooms, shaken hands with presidents, but in this tiny office, he felt the weight of something real. Something raw. And for the first time in a long time, he knew exactly what he needed to do. Back in his high-rise office overlooking the city skyline, Jackson Reed sat in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows, but for once, the view didn't impress him. The city he'd helped build looked different now. Colder. Quieter. More detached. His assistant, Rachel, stepped into the room, a folder in hand. "You cancelled your meetings for the day. Is everything all right?" Jackson turned to her, eyes steady. "I need your help. We're going to change someone's life." Rachel raised an eyebrow. She was used to Jackson's intense energy, usually directed at acquisitions and quarterly numbers. But this? This was new. He walked to his desk, pulling out a yellow legal pad. "Her name is Nina Lopez. She's a nurse at St. Grace. She's been sleeping at a bus stop between shifts. I want to make sure that never happens again." Rachel's brows softened. "You want to set her up with a place?" "Not just that," he said. "I want to pay her rent for the next 2 years, buy her decent furniture, and cover any debts tied to her mother's treatment." Rachel began scribbling notes, but Jackson wasn't done. "I also want to set up a $50,000 emergency fund, just for nurses like her. No bureaucracy. Just direct help. And, if she ever wants to go to med school, I want her tuition paid in full." He paused, then added, "And not a word to the media. This isn't for headlines. It's for her." Rachel looked up, stunned. "That's generous." Jackson gave a small, almost sad smile. "I spent 20 years chasing wealth. But last night, I saw more courage and sacrifice in one exhausted nurse than I've seen in boardrooms my whole career." He stepped toward the window again. "She's the kind of person who holds the world together, quietly, without thanks. It's time someone stood up for her." Rachel nodded, her voice quiet. "I'll start making the calls." As she left, Jackson sat back down and looked at the pad of paper in front of him. It no longer held numbers and projections, just a name. Nina Lopez. And under it, one word. Deserves. The night air was crisp, and a thin fog hung just above the sidewalks as the city lights shimmered in the distance. At exactly 12:47 a.m., the same time he'd seen her 2 nights before, Jackson Reed's black car pulled to a quiet stop near the bus bench. This time, he didn't stay inside. He stood under the flickering street lamp, holding a simple manila envelope in one hand and a thermos of hot cocoa in the other. No entourage. No press. Just him. Moments later, Nina Lopez appeared at the corner, her steps slow and tired. She looked just as she had before, scrubs wrinkled from a long shift, hair pulled back messily, and a small bag slung over her shoulder. But when she saw someone standing at her bench, she hesitated. Jackson stepped forward gently. "Nina." She blinked, confused. "Do I know you?" "Not really," he said kindly. "But I saw you sleeping here 2 nights ago. I couldn't stop thinking about it. About you." Her posture stiffened with unease. "If this is some kind of joke." "It's not," he interrupted softly, extending the thermos. "Hot cocoa. And this," he handed her the envelope, "is something I hope will change everything." Nina took the envelope cautiously, her fingers trembling. She opened it slowly. Inside were several documents: a rental agreement for a fully furnished apartment just blocks from the hospital, a $50,000 nurse emergency fund certificate in her name, and a personal letter from Jackson. Her eyes widened as she scanned the pages. "Is this real?" Jackson nodded. "I know what it feels like to be unseen. To keep giving when you have nothing left. You shouldn't have to sleep on a bench just because you care too much." Tears welled in Nina's eyes, her voice cracking. "Why are you doing this?" "Because the world needs people like you. And people like me need to remember what truly matters." For the first time in days, Nina let herself exhale. The warmth from the cocoa seeped into her hands, and something else, something deeper, began to thaw inside her. Hope. 1 year later. The grand ballroom of the St. Grace Foundation Gala shimmered with soft lights and the gentle clink of silverware. The city's wealthiest philanthropists and leaders filled the tables, but tonight, the spotlight wasn't on them. It was on Nina Lopez. She stood at the podium in a soft cream dress, her hair neatly pinned, a graceful poise replacing the exhaustion that once clung to her. A medical student badge now hung from her neck, and beside her on stage stood the hospital director and several nurses who had once shared her struggles. Jackson Reed watched quietly from the back, seated far from the VIP section. He didn't need attention. He only needed to see what had grown from that one quiet night. Nina's voice trembled as she began to speak. Last year, I was sleeping at a bus stop, hiding the fact that I was too broke and too ashamed to ask for help. I worked double shifts, cared for patients I didn't know, yet I had no home to return to. The room fell silent. I thought I was invisible. But someone saw me. Someone reminded me that being strong doesn't mean you never fall, it means someone helps you stand again. She paused, her eyes scanning the crowd until they settled, just briefly, on Jackson. She gave a tiny smile. That night changed my life. And because of that gift, I'm not only studying to become a doctor now. I've also helped launch a fund that's already supported 17 nurses during crises. Applause erupted. Nina continued, her voice stronger now. The world is filled with people who give without expecting anything back. Nurses. Teachers. Caregivers. Tonight, let's not only celebrate them, let's protect them. Let's see them. As she stepped away from the podium, several in the audience wiped away tears. Jackson stayed seated, his eyes misty but proud. In that moment, he realized, success wasn't measured in IPOs or headlines. It was measured in ripples, quiet moments of kindness that spread farther than he ever imagined. And Nina, she was just the beginning.